My stepdad Caleb cornered me in our Nashville record store's back room. His voice hushed, eyes too sharp. I was tipsy, baiting him, chasing his spark. His fingers grazed mine, electric, wrong. I pressed harder, reckless. The secret I exposed with his lover. It's raw what I did to ruin them. You'll be stunned. I stumbled into the back room of our Nashville record store just past midnight. The bar's cheap whiskey still humming in my veins. Broadway's neon glow dimming behind me. When I saw my stepdad, Caleb, a 55-year-old shop owner who'd once owned dive bar stages, sorting vinyls under a flickering bulb, his dark hair streaked with silver, his denim shirt unbuttoned, radiating that gritty vibe I'd been itching to toy with for weeks. Mom Laura was at her pottery workshop, her urban planning sketches scattered across our kitchen table, and I knew she'd lose it if she caught me out late, like when she'd chewed me out for ditching her book club last month. So, I moved softly, but I craved Caleb's attention. Had for a while, and the whiskey made it easy to stir trouble. I kicked off my sneakers, saying his vinyls looked too worn for a Saturday night. My voice low with a grin, trying to snag his focus without causing a scene, hoping he'd bite. Caleb glanced up, his eyes piercing despite the hour, saying I'd barged into his work uninvited. His tone dry, a touch sarcastic, but he didn't look away, like he noticed my sway and wasn't entirely pissed. I leaned against a box, saying he'd look better spinning records than stacking them. My fingers brushing a vinyl cover, a slow move to catch his gaze, knowing Laura's workshop ended soon. Her last text about a zoning meeting unread on my phone. I wasn't aiming for anything huge, just a nudge to get him looking. And I said his shop needed more pulse. My words sharp, testing, because I wanted to see if he'd push back, not just stand there like Laura's dull husband. He slid a record aside, saying pulse wasn't his issue, and stepped closer to the box. His hand landing on a cover near mine, not touching, but close enough to spark the thrill I'd been chasing. His voice low, asking what I was playing at, like he'd caught my vibe and wasn't shutting it down. I tilted my head, saying I bet he still had some stage fire in him. My scarf slipping slightly on purpose to hold his eyes, and he said fire like mine was trouble, his tone half serious with that jagged edge I liked. His fingers nudged the cover, brushing the air by my wrist, not grabbing, but enough to crank up the heat I'd wanted. His hands rough, like he was torn between pulling back or diving in. The back room's faint hum of distant bar noise made it feel like we were alone. Laura's workshop a ticking clock, her presence heavy, like she'd hear if I laughed too loud. I wanted to push, see how much he'd give, but I had to keep it smooth. So, I grabbed a record. Tom Petty, scratched but iconic, flipping it over, saying I'd nab his best stuff someday. My voice a quick jab, meaning it. And he gave a tight smirk, saying stuff like mine was tough to handle. His hand shifting a box, a move that landed because I'd wanted it. Wanted him to react, even with Laura's shadow so close. Her car rolled into the lot early, her voice calling my name from the shop's front, sharp like she'd sensed something off. And I stepped back, tossing the record onto the box, saying I'd been checking inventory, my voice fast, casual, while Caleb grabbed a stack, saying he'd been sorting, his tone flat like he hadn't just leaned into my move. His glance quick, like he knew I'd felt it. I yelled I'd head out. Moving to the door, Laura waiting, her eyes narrowing at my scarf, asking why I was here so late, her gaze flicking to the back room's light like she'd caught something wrong. A detail she'd store. And I said the bar ran late, shrugging, my steps quick, not looking at him, but feeling his eyes, knowing he'd stayed silent, letting me carry it. The back room's musty air thick with what I'd sparked. She didn't press, muttering about her workshop, but her look lingered. And I headed home. The whiskey's buzz fading. Caleb's vibe clinging to me, planning my next move because her eyes saw too much. And I wasn't letting this go. Not when I'd just set it off. For days after I got that jolt from Caleb in the back room, I was done with Laura's urban planning sketches cluttering our Nashville kitchen. Her voice droning on a client call about greenway permits when I saw a chance to turn up the heat. Heading to Caleb's record store downtown to drop off a flyer for her charity auction, knowing he'd be there prepping for a weekend vinyl sale. I kept replaying his backroom move, how his hand had come close to mine, and I wanted to push him, see if he'd lean in or pull back, because I'd kicked this off and wasn't letting it drop. Laura's knack for catching me out, like when she grilled me about my scarf, had me watching my step, but messing with Caleb, testing his edge, was too good to pass up. I threw on a cropped hoodie, left a zipper low, and headed out. Laura's text about a client meeting ignored on my phone. Her voice still nagging like a warning I was ready to ignore. The shop's office was a cramped space behind the counter, stuffed with receipts, faded posters, and the scent of coffee and vinyl. Caleb was at the desk, sorting orders, his denim shirt open, silver hair a mess, looking less like a shop owner and more like the guy who'd jammed with bands I'd kill to meet. The kind of vibe I'd been itching to crack since I'd teased him that night. I dropped the flyer on his desk, saying his sale looked like it needed some spark to draw a crowd. My voice sharp with a grin to grab his attention, and he looked up, saying I'd walked into his chaos without knocking, his tone dry, a bit snappy, but his eyes hit my hoodie. A look that said he wasn't brushing me off. I leaned on the desk, saying Laura's auction needed his old stage charm to sell tickets. My fingers pushing the flyer closer, a slow move to make him notice. Knowing Laura's call could end any minute, her last question about my late shop hours still fresh. The risk making me bold, not nervous, because I was calling the shots. I shifted, saying he'd probably forgotten how to work a crowd, my hoodie slipping open a bit on purpose to keep his eyes, and he put his pen down, saying crowds like mine were hard to figure. His words slow with a cynical bite, like D caught my move and wasn't sure how to play it. His hand sliding a stack of receipts, coming close to my fingers, not touching, but enough to kick up the heat I'd been after. His hands rough, like he was stuck between backing off and stepping up. The office's buzz of shop chatter outside made it feel like we were in our own world. Laura's client call a shadow I could feel. I wanted to push, see how much he'd give. So I leaned closer, saying figuring me out would take more than his usual moves. My voice low, daring, because I wasn't here to play it safe, just to keep him hooked. Guilt creeping in, quiet but real, when I spotted Laura's photo on the desk, her smile a stab at what I was messing with. He stood, saying moves weren't his thing anymore. His tone half serious, and stepped to a shelf, grabbing a vinyl, saying he'd need help if I was staying. His voice a challenge, like he'd called my bluff, and I moved beside him, saying I'd help if he admitted I'd got him rattled. My fingers brushing the shelf's edge, a move to keep him locked. The shop's noise fading, like we'd shut out everything. But Laura's presence loomed, her text a whisper in my head. I wanted to go harder, but a delivery guy's shout, yelling about a late shipment, cut through, not stopping us, but shifting it, and I stepped back, saying we'd spooked the guy, my laugh forced, because his words had hit, and I'd leaned too close, guilt sharper now, like a weight I couldn't shake. I grabbed my bag, saying his sale was fine. He didn't need me. My voice light to cover how his vibe had stuck. And he said I'd be back. He'd put money on it. His tone calm, like he'd seen my next step. Laura's text buzzing, asking where I was, like she'd caught a wrong note. I headed out, saying I'd walk, not wanting his shadow. My steps quick, the shop's noise fading, knowing I'd pushed too far. And her questions would hit hard if I didn't cool it. But that heat was burning, and I wasn't sure I could stop without losing the edge I'd started. 10 days after I cranked the heat in Caleb's shop office, I was itching to get out of Laura's urban planning clutter filling our Nashville living room. Her voice droning on a client call about park layouts when I saw a shot to push things further. Heading to the record store's studio to help Caleb tune a guitar for a promo video. Knowing he'd be there alone, I couldn't stop thinking about his office vibe, how he'd leaned into my jab, his hand brushing close. And I wanted to see if I could crack his cool, because I'd started this and wasn't backing off. Laura's sharp eye, like when she'd questioned my late shop hours, had me playing careful, but messing with Caleb, seeing how far he'd go, was a high I couldn't shake. I threw on a loose tank top, low cut, and headed out. Laura's text about a client deal ignored on my phone. Her voice a warning I was ready to tune out. The studio was a small soundproof room in the shop's back, lined with foam panels and old gig posters, smelling of wood polish and amp dust. Caleb was there, tweaking a Telecaster, his denim sleeves rolled, silver hair catching the soft light, looking less like a shop owner and more like the guy who'd backed bands I'd kill to jam with. The kind of edge I'd been craving to test since I'd teased him in the back room. I shut the door, saying his video better have some grit to sell. My voice sharp with a grin to grab him, and he looked up, saying I'd walked into his space unannounced again, his tone dry, a bit snarky, but his eyes hit my top, a look that said he wasn't dodging me. I leaned against the mixing board, saying Laura's auction needed his old stage swagger. My fingers brushing a cable, a slow move to make him notice. knowing Laura's call could end any minute, her last nag about my schedule still fresh. The risk making me bold, because I was running this show. I shifted, saying he'd probably forgotten how to hit the right chords. My tank top slipping a bit on purpose to keep his eyes, and he set the guitar down, saying chords like mine were hard to play. His words slow with a cynical edge, like he'd caught my move and wasn't sure how to counter. His hand adjusting a mic stand, coming close to my arm, not touching, but enough to light a fire I'd been chasing. His hands rough, like he was stuck between pulling back and stepping in. The studio's quiet hum of amps made it feel like we were cut off from the world. Laura's client call a shadow I could feel. I wanted to push, so I leaned closer, saying playing me would take more than his usual tricks. My voice low, daring, because I wasn't here to play it safe. Guilt creeping in, real now, when I spotted Laura's notebook on a shelf, her park sketches a stab at what I was risking. He stood, saying tricks weren't his deal anymore. His tone rough, and then he stopped, voice dropping, saying he'd been trying to keep this straight, but I was making it impossible, that he felt something he shouldn't, something real. His words raw, like he'd let his guard slip, and I froze. My fingers tightening on the cable, because I'd pushed for this, wanted it, but hearing it hit hard. A rush I'd chased, now burning. Guilt cutting deeper, because I'd meant to steer, not feel. Laura's notebook, a reminder of what I was breaking. I said he'd better mean it. My voice softer, almost shaky, because I felt it too. And it scared me, even as it pulled me. And I stepped closer, saying real was my kind of sound. My hand brushing the mic stand, a move to keep him locked, but honest enough to sting. The studio's silence wrapping us tight, like we'd stepped into a space no one could touch. Laura's voice broke through, calling my name from the shop floor, pissed, like she'd sensed something wrong. And I pulled back, saying I'd been helping, voice cracking, while Caleb grabbed the guitar, saying he'd been tuning, his tone flat, like he hadn't just laid himself bare. His glance quick, like he knew we'd gone too far. I shouted I'd be out, heading for the door. Laura waiting, her eyes narrowing at my top, asking why I was here so late, her gaze flicking to the studio's light, like she'd caught a wrong vibe, a detail she'd hold. And I said I'd been sorting promo stuff, shrugging, my steps fast, not looking at him, but feeling his eyes, knowing he'd stayed quiet, letting me carry it. The studio's muffled hum heavy with what I'd drawn out. She didn't push, muttering about her call, but her look stuck, and I headed home. The bar's buzz gone. Caleb's confession burning. Planning my next move, because her eyes saw too much, and I wasn't letting this slip. Not when I'd just hit a deeper note. 2 weeks after Caleb's confession in the studio set my nerves on fire, I was over Laura's urban planning papers cluttering our Nashville living room. Her voice a hum on a client call about green spaces when I jumped at a chance to push things further. Tagging along with Caleb to a warehouse across town to sort record store promo gear for a music festival. I kept replaying his raw words, how he'd admitted he felt something, and I wanted to test him, see if I could shake his cool, because I'd started this and wasn't slowing down. Laura's sharp instincts, like when she caught my shaky excuse after the studio, had me playing careful, but toying with Caleb, seeing how close I could get, was a rush I couldn't ditch. I slipped on a loose t-shirt, sleeves rolled, and followed him out. Laura's text about a client deal ignored on my phone, her voice a warning I brushed off. The warehouse was a sprawl of crates and boxes, smelling of dust and cardboard, with forklifts droning in the distance. Caleb stood by a table, sorting flyers and posters, his denim shirt creased, hair a mess, looking less like a shop owner and more like the guy who'd backed bands I'd kill to see. The kind of vibe I'd been craving to crack since I teased him in the back room. I dropped my bag on a crate, saying his promo looked like it needed a boost to pull a crowd. My voice sharp with a grin to grab him, and he looked up, saying I'd shown up to his chaos uninvited. His tone dry, a bit snarky, but his eyes hit my rolled sleeves, a look that said he wasn't shutting me out. I stepped to the table, saying Laura's auction had more pull than his posters. My fingers sliding a flyer closer, a slow move to catch his eye, knowing Laura was tied up, but her call could hit any second. The risk making me bold, because I was steering this. I leaned over the table, saying he'd probably lost his knack for drawing a crowd. My t-shirt shifting slightly on purpose to keep his attention. And he set a stack of posters down, saying crowds like mine were tough to handle. His words slow with a cynical edge, like he'd caught my move and was weighing his play. His hand pushing a box, brushing the air near my arm, not touching, but close enough to kick up the heat I'd been after. His hands rough, like he was stuck between stepping back and leaning in. The warehouse's clatter of crates made it feel like we were in our own pocket. Laura's call a shadow I could sense. I wanted to push, so I slid another flyer, saying handling me would take more than his old moves. My voice low, daring, because I wasn't here to play safe. Guilt hitting real now, when I saw Laura's business card tucked in a crate, her name a jab at what I was messing with. He stood, saying old moves weren't his thing. His tone rough, and stepped to a crate, lifting a banner, saying he'd need help if I was sticking around. His voice a challenge, like he'd matched my jab. And I moved beside him, saying I'd help if he admitted I'd rattled him. My fingers brushing the banner's edge, a move to keep him locked. The warehouse's noise fading, like we'd blocked out the world. But Laura's presence loomed, her text a whisper in my head. I wanted to go further, but a worker's shout, cursing a dropped crate, cut through, not stopping us, but shifting the mood, and I stepped back, saying we'd spooked the guy. My laugh forced, because his words had landed, and I'd leaned too close. Guilt sharper, like a weight I couldn't dodge. I grabbed my bag, saying his promo was set. He didn't need me. My voice light to hide how his vibe had stuck. And he said I'd be back. He bet on it. His tone calm, like he'd seen my next step. Laura's text buzzing, asking where I was, like she'd caught a wrong note. I headed out, saying I'd walk, not wanting his shadow. My steps quick, the warehouse's dust lingering, knowing I'd pushed too far. And her questions would hit hard if I didn't ease up. But that heat was burning, and I wasn't sure I could stop without losing the edge I'd built. 1 week after I shook Caleb up in that dusty Nashville warehouse, I pulled him to a dive bar on Broadway to help with a music shop promo. Tired of Laura's urban planning emails piling up at home, her voice droning about plaza designs. His studio confession, those raw words about feeling something real, kept replaying, and I wanted to push him to the limit. My whiskey buzz from a pregame shot making me fearless. Laura's sharp eye, like when she'd caught my weak excuse after the studio, had me watching my steps, but toying with Caleb, testing how far he'd go, was a rush I couldn't quit. I threw on a loose tank top, sleeves rolled, and met him there. Laura's text about a client deal ignored on my phone. Her voice a warning I didn't care about. The bar was loud, neon signs buzzing, air thick with beer and smoke. Caleb stood by a small stage, tuning a Gibson, his denim shirt open, silver hair messy, looking less like a shop owner and more like the rock star I'd been dying to crack since I teased him in the back room. I stepped up, saying his promo needed my energy to pull a crowd. My voice sharp with a grin to hook him, and he shot back that I'd crashed his plan. His tone snarky, eyes catching my top, a look that said he wasn't backing off. I grabbed a guitar from a stand, strumming a quick chord, saying he'd tank without me. My tank top shifting slightly, a move to grab his attention, keeping it subtle to stay safe. He strummed a riff, saying I'd pushed too far. His hand brushing the fretboard near mine, not touching, but close enough to light a fire I'd been chasing. His eyes holding mine, like he was daring me to keep going. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low, saying I'd steal his spotlight if he didn't step up. My fingers sliding along the guitar neck, a bold nudge to keep him locked, knowing Laura could call any second. Her last question about my late night still fresh. The risk making me push harder, because I was in control. He said stealing from him would take more than my tricks. His tone rough with that cynical edge I liked, and I grinned, saying tricks were my specialty. Guilt hitting as I saw Laura's name on a bar flyer, her auction a stab at what I was risking. The bar's noises, clinking glasses, loud chatter, made it feel like we were alone, but Laura's shadow loomed. Her text a whisper in my head. I wanted to go further, but a drunk patron's shout, cursing a spilled drink, cut through, not stopping us, but shifting the vibe, and I stepped back, saying we'd spooked the guy. My laugh forced, because his look had landed, and I'd leaned too close, guilt sharper, like a weight I couldn't shake. I set the guitar down, saying his promo was good enough. He didn't need me. My voice light to hide how his vibe had stuck, and he said I'd be back. He'd put money on it, his tone calm, like he knew my next move. Laura's call hit, pissed, asking where I was, her voice loud over the bar noise. I said I'd been helping Caleb, voice quick, guilt surging as I headed out, her eyes catching my flushed face when I got home. Details she'd hold. The bar's neon glow heavy with what I'd stirred up. 1 week after our bar jam set my nerves ablaze, I slipped into the record store's office in Nashville on a rainy Tuesday night. Laura's urban planning binders cluttering our home. Her absence at a client meeting a slim chance to push my game with Caleb to its limit. His studio confession, those raw words about feeling something, and our barroom riff still burned, and I wanted to end this, not with a reckless move, but with a showdown that'd leave him exposed, his secrets out. Laura's sharp instincts, like when she caught my flushed face after the bar, had me on edge, but outplaying Caleb, turning his own vibe against him, was a rush I couldn't quit. I wore a loose t-shirt, sleeves rolled, and stepped in. Finding him at the desk, sorting receipts, his denim shirt open, silver hair messy, less shop owner, more the rock star I'd been unraveling since that backroom night, his presence hitting me hard, like a chord I couldn't shake. I leaned against the desk, saying his receipts looked as stale as his old gigs. My voice sharp with a smirk to hook him. And he looked up, saying I'd crashed his night again, his tone dry, snarky, but his eyes locked on mine, like he'd been waiting for this. I slid a flyer closer, saying Laura's auction needed his charm. My t-shirt shifting slightly, a subtle move to keep his focus, knowing Laura could show up any second. Her last text about a vendor deal ignored. The risk making me bold, because I was in control. He set his pen down, saying charm like his was too much for this stage. His words slow with a cynical bite. His hand pushing a stack of papers, brushing the air near my fingers, not touching, but close enough to light a fire I'd chased, his hands heavy, like he was caught in a trap. We both sat. The office's quiet hum of rain outside making it feel like we were alone. Laura's binders at home, a reminder of what I was risking. I stood, saying too much was my style. My voice a low challenge, and stepped closer, saying he'd been dodging me since the bar. My fingers trailing the desk's edge, a move to keep him pinned. Guilt sharp now, because I'd gone too far. Felt too much. Laura's photo on the wall, a family shot from last fall, cutting through my nerve like a blade. He rose, saying he wasn't dodging, but I'd made it impossible to stay steady. His voice rough, like he'd dropped his guard. And I froze, my hand on a stack of receipts, because I'd wanted this, pushed for it, but the weight of it, her trust, our family, hit hard. Guilt louder than the storm. I pulled out the emails, printouts of his plans with Emily, his betrayal of Laura, of me, and slapped them on the desk, saying, thought I wouldn't find out. His face went pale, but his eyes didn't flinch, and I stepped closer, voice low. You picked the wrong one to cross. Laura's car roared into the lot early, her voice slicing through, calling my name, furious, like she'd sensed a break in the house, and I stepped back, saying I'd been sorting, voice shaky, while Caleb shoved the emails into a drawer, saying he'd been working, his tone flat, his glance quick, like he knew we'd crossed too far. Laura stormed in, eyes blazing, screaming what I'd done, her voice shredding, saying she'd seen my late nights, his excuses, my dodges, accusing Caleb of betraying her again. Her words cutting at secrets I hadn't grasped, throwing a binder at the wall, yelling I'd broken her trust, broken us, and I cracked, confessing I pushed him, but he's been with Emily. Laura's scream choked, Caleb's silence a roar. The office's rain-soaked light spilling out, leaving me to face the wreckage I'd lit. My control shattered.